Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our SEL Stakeholders Coalition meeting. We are the Office of Special Services, and we would like to just remind you of our vision for our office, that all students deserve an inclusive educational experience that supports them in meeting their individual goals and dreams. We believe that advocating for students in conjunction with multiple stakeholders will help to eradicate ableism in our schools and society. Through our advocacy, we will continue to dismantle inequitable practices and eliminate disparate outcomes for students with disabilities. So all of that to say, um, we are invested in students getting what they need on an individual basis. And part of that definitely is social and emotional learning. So welcome tonight, and thank you for joining us.
All right, so at this time, if everybody could add your name, your role in your building to the chat, and we're going to answer one of these two questions. What is one of your favorite winter holiday traditions? Or what is a strategy you use to manage holiday stress? And really, if there's not a whole lot of people on, if anybody wants to come off mute and share one of their ideas. Watching the Hallmark Channel. Cooking. Ooh, a new bourbon cream coffee, hot chocolate, love that.
I would say for the last 4 or 5 years, we've tried to put a different twist on Christmas dinner. We, by Christmas time, are over turkey and ham and the traditional foods. So we try to go with a different theme every year. It's been Mexican, it's been Creole, it's been all different things. So I'm trying to figure out what my theme is for this year.
Nice. Binge watching Harry Potter series. I love that. One of the ways to manage holiday stress, not agreeing to things that would cause you to be spread too thin. I like that, Jamie. That's awesome. Leaving one black-eyed pea on the plate for good luck at New Year's Eve. All right, Chris Landis, sleep and massages help stress. I love that. All right.
All right, well, thank you guys for sharing. If you just hopped on and you want to add into that, totally fine. Keep on filling up that chat. I just want to go over, I'm Lindsay Hayes. I'm another one of our SEL coaches. And I just want to go over our definition of what we think SEL is. We're going to go through this at each meeting. I'm not going to read the slide for you verbatim, but SEL is the process of how people acquire skills to understand and manage their emotions, set and achieve goals, build and show empathy, and establish and maintain positive relationships. Next slide, please. And on this slide, SEL creates educational equity through building our school, family, and community partnerships through the use of collaboration, rigorous curriculum, and evaluation. This gives voice to our young people and empowers them in their environments. Next slide, please. And finally, our framework, is a systemic approach which establishes equitable environments and focuses on 4 key settings: the classroom, schools, homes, and communities.
All right, before we really dive in this evening, I want to talk to you about what our goals are for our coalition for this school year. As you can see here, it's gaining a shared understanding of the Castle's competencies, 5 competencies, and how they're important to our community. We want to be able to analyze SEL competencies through an equity lens. And then because we know that there's lots of debate about SEL and its intended purpose, we want to be able to respond effectively to the misconceptions about SEL. And then our overall arching goal is so that SEL can help communities advance equity by cultivating adult and student practices that close opportunity gaps and create more inclusive communities. So the goal of SEL is to build skills and competencies that help students successfully navigate and meaningfully contribute to their schools, careers, families, relationships, and multicultural communities. Systemic implementation of SEL both fosters and depends upon an equitable learning environment where all students and adults feel respected, valued, affirmed in their individual interests, talents, social identities, cultural values, and backgrounds. Next slide, please.
All right, as we dive a little bit deeper into those CASEL competencies, first we have self-awareness. Yep. And some of the identifiers there are identifying emotions, recognizing strengths, sense of self-confidence, self-efficacy, which we will talk a little bit more about in the next slide. And then today we will go a little deeper into self-management, which is impulse control, stress management, self-discipline, perseverance, and organizational skills. And some that we will get into in future meetings are social awareness, which includes perspective taking, empathy, appreciating diversity, and respect for others. And then in our next is our relationship skills, communication, building relationships, working cooperatively, helping, seeking help. And then in our last competency, responsible decision making, which we can all make sure that we focus a little harder in that space, identifying problems, analyzing situations, evaluating, reflecting, and ethical responsibility. And as we roll into the next slide, taking a look at our last meeting where we talked a little bit about self-awareness, which is the ability to understand one's own emotions, thoughts, and values and how they influence behavior across contexts. And that includes capacity to recognize one's strengths and limitations with a well-grounded sense of confidence and purpose. And so we are going to do a quick recap of what was talked about in our last meeting. Erica?
All right, so in our last meeting, as Tanja just said, we spoke about self-awareness, and we talked about what that would look like if it were present in the classroom, school, community setting, or workplace. And so a lot of our responses were that we would see cultures represented, we would see gender preferences being honored, we would see cultural sharing. And if self-awareness is valued by young people and adults in our school, our district, state, and community, then students would be understood, they would feel included, everyone would be empathetic towards others, and it would build their confidence. And we are currently prioritizing and supporting self-awareness in our classrooms and schools and workplaces through our social skills lessons, our SEL lessons, and through community circles. And then lastly, we feel like this competency connects to the goal of advancing educational equity and excellence because student voices would be heard and they'd feel a sense of belonging. Their voices would guide what's happening in the classroom, and we'd, of course, look at students' assets and not their deficits. All right, next slide, please.
Hello, everyone. My internet is acting crazy. My name is Shayla Hampton. I am one of the SEL coaches for Ben Davis. I'll hop back on the laptop in a few moments here. But I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about self-management, which is the competency that I work with the most. That's the one that I'm working with myself the most. But what I wanted to do is, if you could, in the comment section or in the chat section, please let us know, what do you think about self-management? What keywords comes to your head? Just let us know, like, what do you think of when you think of self-management? What do you know about self-management? And if you want to dive a little deeper, what does self-management look like in various cultures? So let me see if I can do this on my phone. Alrighty. Keeping myself accountable for my goals, great. Identifying emotions and self. Ability to reflect on myself and my goals. Reflecting upon my own actions, behaviors, yes. Self-management does look different for everyone. Not saying all the things that enter my mind, yes. Self-care, absolutely. Honest reflection, for better or for worse. That's really big, Matt. Appreciate that. Stop and think. Thank you, Chris. Keeping myself regulated when getting stressed. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me turn back here. We actually have a video that we want to show that talks about self-management. So if Miss Dr. Reinhardt
Let's talk about self-management, a set of skills that are critical to kids' success in school and beyond. Self-management has several names and many concepts associated with it. We're also going to talk about it in terms of marshmallows, stop signs, squeezy balls, and teaching. Let's start with the marshmallows. In the late 1960s, a Stanford professor named Walter Mischel wanted to gauge young children's ability to delay gratification, so he conducted a groundbreaking self-management experiment. He and his researchers took preschool kids and sat them in a room in front of a marshmallow or other treat. The researcher would say, "I'm going to leave for 15 minutes. If you would like to eat the marshmallow, then eat it. If you can wait until I come back, I'll give you a second one and you can eat them both." That's it. That was the whole experiment. Mischel found that despite their best efforts, 2/3 of the kids ate the marshmallow before the researcher came back. In the years since then, the experiment has been copied many times with kids from different communities, ethnicities, and backgrounds in a range of countries all over the world. Typically, 2/3 of the kids eat the marshmallow. Here's where the results of Michel's experiment get really interesting. After running the experiment a bunch of times in California, his team tracked down all the marshmallow test kits they could find 10 years later, and 20 years, and 30, and 40, and they found some startling results. The kids who were able to wait for the second treat scored better on the SATs, once you control for IQ, were rated as more academically and socially competent by their parents, and had a greater ability to plan, handle stress, and concentrate without becoming distracted, even decades later. There has been a bunch of research that builds on or extends these findings. One larger, more comprehensive study followed 1,000 children born in the early 70s in Dunedin, New Zealand. Focusing on self-management, researchers interviewed the children as they grew from 4 to 11. They also gave questionnaires to parents, teachers, and peers. Then they tracked down the original kids when they were in their 30s. They found that the children's ratings on self-management between the ages of 4 and 11 correlated with whether or not they were high school or college graduates, addicted to alcohol or drugs, economically stable or living paycheck to paycheck, involved in criminal activity. All these results lead to one big question. What does this mean for the kids who ate the first marshmallow? For that matter, what does it mean for the kids who don't have self-management between the ages of 4 and 11? Does this mean if the child hasn't developed the right self-management skills early, her whole life path is much worse? Here's what Walter Mischel says about this exact issue.
We're talking about correlations that are significant. We're not talking about a destiny for an individual. So I want to be very clear that a branding would be completely missing the point, particularly since the most exciting findings about the marshmallow experiments are the ease with which it is possible to change an individual's ability to delay gratification.
And there are ways to do that.
There are very straightforward ways to do it that connect with how the brain works. The interpretation to be taken from the findings is that this is an enormously important skill. It has predictive qualities, it has protective effects, but it is teachable, it is changeable.
In fact, Michelle showed that self-management could be taught in an experiment similar to the marshmallow test. In this version, researchers gave the kids helpful ideas before the test. They said, imagine the marshmallow is actually a flat picture, or a cloud, or there is a bug crawling on it. Suddenly, the kids could wait far longer. So there are strategies and techniques you can give kids to help them nurture and grow their self-management muscles, many of which can help students in longer-lasting, more profound ways. These strategies extend beyond envisioning a situation differently. They involve teaching kids to avoid certain situations, modify their surroundings to reduce distractions, manage their emotions constructively, shift their attention, organize to complete tasks, and plan how to overcome obstacles that may arise. Still, despite growing research on the topic, we're in the early days of learning the best ways to help students build self-management skills. The techniques that work, or even just what to focus on, can vary from student to student in a single class. But one thing we do know is this. Teachers in the classroom and parents at home tend to notice self-management issues the most when something goes wrong. A student who loses track of his assignments and comes to class unprepared. A student who constantly interrupts peers and teachers. A student who fidgets constantly and can't focus in the classroom. This could be any kid, at any age, at any ability level. What adults normally do is see this behavior and tell the student to stop. Stop messing around, you have to do your homework. Stop fidgeting. Or like in Michelle's experiment, don't eat the marshmallow. Now, when you do that, you're basically telling the child you have to stop, and you have to figure out how to do it. You've just put it all on the child, and the problem is, maybe the child doesn't know how. For whatever reason, they never learned this particular self-management skill. Saying stop doesn't fix that. So what if rather than saying stop, you say, instead of what you're doing now, which isn't working too well, why don't you do this? For that kid who is fidgeting all the time, what if you give him a squeezy ball and say, squeeze this ball as much as you want because you need to do something with your hands and that will make it easier for you to pay attention in class. Instead of just saying stop or no, you're saying, here's a strategy to try. One of the findings of the original marshmallow test is that it's primarily a test of whether a child has learned particular self-management strategies. Kids who stare at the marshmallow and simply try their hardest not to eat it, well, they pretty much always eat it. The kids who have a strategy to shift their attention by singing a song, walking around, putting their forehead on the table, covering their eyes, or any number of things are best able to wait for the second marshmallow. As we now know, shifting attention is one of a broad range of self-management strategies. What works and what to focus on can vary from child to child. But the self-management strategies as a whole are teachable, and like muscles, they can be strengthened in all students. Let's talk about
Hello, thank you. I really apologize. I'm having internet issues, so if I cut out, my apologies. But looking at that slide here, there are two definitions for self-management that we have presented. The first one is the castle definition. So it reads, the abilities to manage one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations and to achieve goals and aspirations. The second definition is self-management is the ability to navigate and shift one's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in a healthy way. In order to make decisions and reach goals that benefits others and oneself. So in the comments, if you could just tell me which definition would you prefer if you were learning about self-management? Which definition would be best for you? Would it be the castle definition, which is first, or the second definition? Which one feels better for you? The second one. Second one. Wonderful. The idea of flexibility, yes. So the key words that really stick out is navigate and shift, because we're able to self-management, we don't want to look at it as a negative or a punitive situation. We want to be able to self-manage ourselves and navigate and shift based off the situation. There's some situations where we need to express our emotions thoughtfully, which is included in the skills. But there are some situations where we may need to hold our tongue. Self-management skills include regulating and expressing one's emotions, demonstrating perseverance and resilience to overcome obstacles, sustaining healthy boundaries, applying strategies to reduce personal and interpersonal stress, setting and monitoring short-term and long-term goals, advocating for oneself and one's needs, maintaining attention, and using feedback constructively. In the video, what really stuck out to me is it's not saying that if you don't have these skills as a young child that your life is just not going to go great. That's not what the video is saying, which they pointed out. But having self-management and learning how to navigate and shift our thoughts at a young age will benefit us in the future, will benefit our students in the future if they're learning those skills. They're learning, when do I need to say something? When do I need to react to something? Because we don't want a situation to happen that results of how we handle the situation. So, just wanted to give that some food for thought.
All right, so we are going to go into breakout rooms and do a little more thought on this. We've created some questions. A coach will be in your session, but coaches, if you want to take a picture of this or use the note catcher, either way, is totally fine. But here are the things that we'd like you to think about. So think about your understanding of self-management and what does this look like in your role? So your specific role in our district, what might this look like? And you can use either one of the definitions to think about maybe what does self-management in your classroom, in your schoolhouse, in your role as an SEL coach, as an administrator. What are some reasons this would be valued by young people and adults in our school, district, state, community, or organization? So kind of think from all those perspectives, really thinking from the student perspective. How could this be prioritized and or supported in our classrooms, schools, workplaces, and youth serving community settings? So here, what we're thinking about is, do we see the stop signs? Do we see the no? Do we see the clip charts? Do we see those things that maybe aren't teaching the skill and supporting the student in the way we would like? How does this priority connect to the goal of advancing educational equity and excellence? So, how might we come up with strategies around, um, all of the work that we're doing around equity in our district? And then, what would be important to focus on to move this forward? So, there is a small group of us, but this is recorded and hopefully will be seen by many. And thinking about in the MSD of Wayne Township, what are the things that we can do to help spread the understanding about self-management and then also to be the models of this work. All right, so I'm going to open the rooms. Please feel free to just share, and coaches, if one of you want to take the lead in your group, that would be amazing. We'll see you back here. How about we take 10 minutes? Does that work for everyone? I'll see you back in 10, and then we'll go from there. You don't have to go to a group unless you want to. It's up to you. I don't even know what group I assigned you to. There's coaches in all of them, so I think you're good. I may like peek in some just to kind of see how things are going.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out, if I stop presenting, would I be able to do it quickly again?
Probably not.
Okay, I don't think I have to stop presenting to join. Let me try. Do you want me to um, stay here, or does it matter to you?
It doesn't matter to me, but I do want to make sure everybody can get into where they need to go. So I will stay here then if you want to go and check in on people.
I don't know how to jump around.
Oh,
It's just inviting me to breakout group 1.
who is in breakout group 1? Yeah, you could go to breakout group 1.
All
That
right.
might be a good thing.
anybody, am I still sharing my screen or no? Okay. Can you guys see it now? Okay.
Penny, if you want to go to the next slide, I think Ebony is going to lead us in debriefing.
Oh, is the debriefing part of this slide like our commentary in the breakout rooms? Because if not, can I say one thing before we go to the next one? Let me look. Okay, good. So what I was trying to explain to our last group, and it's never enough time in the breakout rooms. I almost text Tara like, give us 5 more minutes. But what I was trying to say is in secondary, we're struggling
Penny, I
with.
actually did give you extra time and you don't even know it. I gave you 8 more minutes.
We needed.
I know. I'm sorry.
We just need, time together always. It's okay. But anyway, really quickly, this idea that self-management evolves as you get older, right? Or evolves as you experience different situations. So it doesn't have to be, as I'm thinking about it, getting older. It could be, I have survived a huge loss, or I have survived a huge change of economic status within my family, or whatever the case may be. I think when you go through life experiences and you survive things, or you come out on the other side of things that you thought might break you, even as a child, you grow. There are pieces of you that grow, and self-management can evolve. But in our group, Terry, Tracy, Paisley, and Carrie, we were talking about, just how sharing stories and being able to tell kids like feelings aren't bad. They are what they are. You can experience these things because, as a matter of fact, I, as your teacher or mentor, whomever, I experienced those same feelings, So I was about to share with them that in secondary, we're struggling a little bit on the side of the curriculum, because in elementary, they have second step. And so, when we think about how SEL sort of evolves as people get a little older, we're just trying to navigate that world of how do we really deliver quality SEL instruction at an appropriate developmental level. Anyway, this has nothing to do with the high school kiddos. It's about me. But I was reading this book called The Untethered Soul. And really what it's about is SEL competencies. It's like really talking about how to view emotions and experiences that we have sometimes with negative emotions when we try to press things down. And the Untethered Soul talks about allowing these emotions to live and then just kind of pass through you. That some like the hurt, the pain of like jealousy, for instance. You try to repress that because you're like, that's a horrible thing to be, is jealous. I can't be jealous. That's horrible. I should be a bigger person than that, rather than just saying, using some self-management to say, let me just feel it. Okay, I'm jealous. I am insanely jealous right now. It's okay. It can pass through me and I'll be okay on the other side of it. So good book to read if you wanted to, read it as a mid-career person, or someone who's kind of like gone through some things, or even if you're just interested in what does this look like as an adult, so that I can better understand how to deliver some of these lessons to my kiddos.
Awesome. Thank you, Penny. So we are going to get our key takeaways from our discussions. I don't know about my group, but I took notes in my group. I don't know that we assigned a note taker, but that's what I was taking notes while I was jumping back and forth in between the slides with the questions. So key takeaways from our discussions. And we're going to focus on these questions that are at the bottom of the slide. Who is this norm to? Who is this leaving out? Who is this impacting in a negative way? And is this program, lesson, idea, etc., reducing or expanding inequity?
So I think I can say something for our group. I won't be representative of every conversation, but I feel like toward like the second half of the conversation, for sure, we were really talking about that impulse control, how to teach it, how to model it, what's effective and developmentally appropriate for expectation for that. And we were a little late returning because Shannon was telling a story about honoring kids, like where they are and what they're doing. And he was telling a story about kids getting the giggles, and the more you try to stop laughing, the harder you laugh. And we all have had that situation. But sometimes we get so hyper focused on our own agenda that we push our developmental level and our needs on the kids. And that's our inability to control our impulse. And that's not always appropriate at the moment. But he talked about how you can handle that with kindness, and that usually can help get you over the hump there. So I guess this is adults need it too. I'm not sure how to sum that up. Developmental, we have to consider a lot of things with impulse control.
We had a similar conversation in our group, Jamie, just about the adults needing to be aware of their own self-management. And do we have a plan for that? Do we know what self-management looks like for us? And are we modeling that? Like, we know we can tell kids, like, here's an alternative to this, here's that, but like, until they see it in practice, it's really hard to do that as a young person. So yeah, we just felt the need for adult things as well, self-management in general. So yeah, I don't know how to necessarily put that into those bottom 4 questions, but
Lindsay, I have something to add to that for those bottom 4 questions for sure. So when we think about adult self-management and those equity questions, who is this norm to? So I think about an adult who decides, part of my self-management is just going to be to kind of be quiet and step away, right? And so that seems like pretty reasonable. Let me just take an adult time out because I don't want to say something inappropriate, or I don't want to come off as aggressive, or whatever the case may be. But when you think about who is this leaving out, who is this norm to, what if the perception from that child is you're shutting me off, you're ignoring me, you are not giving me the attention that I need in this moment. So when we think about our own adult ways of self-management, remember that we also have to communicate that to our kiddos. So, hey, Miss Gregory, when I feel myself getting upset, let me tell you what I'm gonna do. Has nothing to do with you, but I might need about 5 or 6 seconds away from you. I might need to step away. This does not mean I don't love you, that I don't want to hear what you have to say, that I'm not going to return to this conversation, but I may have to step away. Don't take that personally. Can we agree to that? Sort of thing, right? So like, I think that's what our equity questions are saying, that you can come up with some great ways to be the adult in the classroom. But if you're not communicating that to your kiddos, there could be some misunderstandings, whether it's culturally or whether it's just, hey, my teacher doesn't want to talk to me, that situation. So be thinking about that, I think, as you're thinking about, ways to manage yourself, and then like the SEL coaches on here helping your colleagues manage. Just that communication with students and even the colleagues is so important. Todd Hawks and I have been friends for a number of years, but what we've told our team is that we've not worked in this capacity before. So we've had to get to know each other almost all over again in the role of, having to lead a big district, and a lot of different things going on. So how we communicate in a friendly way is totally different than, okay, business has to get done, and these are all the steps that need to happen, and you work totally different than the way I work, So I think just always thinking about situations can change, context could change, and communication is always important.
I wasn't in a group, but I'm going to add to the conversation with that idea of modeling. And I think it was on one of the previous slides, the I do, um, we do, you do. And we do that so well as educators in so many other areas, but sometimes when it comes to self-management, that is not the structure we use. It's really you do. You're expected to do this, and we set these expectations. So I think, and I know we have some English teachers in the group thinking about how I know when I was doing a read aloud or talking about a character analysis when I was doing co-teaching in a seventh grade English classroom, there were many times where the teacher and I would kind of not act it out, but talk about, I think the character is thinking this right now, or I think this is kind of what I'm getting from this. This is what I'm going to hypothesize are my next steps or the character's next steps. So I think, again, we should be doing that in this context as well. So some of those great strategies that we use when we're teaching reading or we're teaching math or social studies, science, chemistry, whatever it is, those strategies and techniques definitely apply in this vein as well. And so just reminding our teachers that, reminding our administrators that, like when you're having a conversation with a student, you need to talk it out. You need to help them understand what are the steps you're going through in your brain as you're trying to use self-management skills, because that's going to be really great modeling for your students.
I think the important point, what Penny was saying about communicating with students, and I put in the chat, the communication is so important because that's how I self-managed, was stepping away. And then I had a student say, well, why don't you want to talk to me right now? And then I was like, oh, and I thought about it. I explained everything else. I explained why we do this, why we do that. And then when I'm self-managing, I'm thinking in the forefront of my brain, it's like, well, this is for me, and not explaining why I'm stepping away. And so the students, her feelings, I think her feelings were hurt. And that hurt me because she was like, why don't you want to talk to me about it right now? One of the other things that we talked about in our group is not prioritizing. I think it was question number 3. How not prioritizing could cause an issue. And so that could impact students and teachers or the class community as a whole in a negative way, because when you don't prioritize that self-management, then you get into a situation where the teacher isn't as accepting of students that don't fit that mold, or that student doesn't know how to self-manage, or that student and you get into the, rut of labeling students. That student is impulsive, and that student is, all of those different things.
Oh, Ebony, that makes me think of a cartoon that Dr. Green uses about all the different labels that get put on kids when they're having challenging behaviors, and how he talks about it's not whether they want to, they can't. And how do we, again, when I think about all of his work and going upstream, this really makes me think about that, what are those executive functioning skills that kids are struggling with, and then how do we actually teach them? Well, it's through these self-management techniques and skills. And then when I think about the equity questions, who is left out and who is impacted in a negative way when it comes to self-management? It's our kiddos with challenging behaviors. Again, they're referred to the office, or as we were talking about community, they're sent away. Well, they don't feel like they belong. So that sense of belonging then is impacted because of a self-management skill. And we know it's a skill that has to be taught, not just expected.
Right. And one thing that comes to mind, and then from the book that Penny was talking about, a lot of times we also overly manage ourselves, and we don't ever show that emotions are real. We can have emotions. It's not abnormal. All of those things. And then when kids, it's like they're taught that they're not okay, as opposed to teaching that emotions are okay. It is okay to feel that way, or that we validate those feelings and then give them some other options on how to manage those emotions. So I think that we all have, for whatever reason, our society tries to make us feel like we can't. Emotions are something that are not okay.
I think that's such a good point, Tracy, because like I know like through this work, it's made me do a lot of internal work myself as to like I didn't model that well for my students at the beginning of my career because I didn't know how to do it. Like I had never had those conversations with other people. Oh, I'm feeling this way because of this, and here's how I'm reacting to that. Until I started doing like my own therapy and like my own stuff. And because of how I was raised or whatever, and that's not a knock on my parents. That's just the way like things kind of are. And I think that's such a good point. And I think if we don't do our own work to figure that out, it's always going to be hard for us to do that. And we're just perpetuating the cycle of that.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes our brokenness is not always bad. We learn a lot through that. And I think that's what we want all kids to learn, is that, again, you can push through it and you learn a lot from those times. And we're here to support one another, during those times. So that's good, Lindsay.
And I'll just add this because I can't let it go out of my head. But Dr. Reinhardt was talking about Dr. Ross Green's work, and I'm a big fan of his work. But one of the things that I'm having more conversations about with a lot of colleagues is the idea of kids can't, right? They don't do well because they can't. And I just like to add a yet to that. They can't yet, right? And so like this idea that somehow SEL causes us to have low expectations of kids, that's not anything that I support. That you can be in a classroom and behave any kind of way you want to in the spirit of, you can't, or SEL. That's not acceptable to me, because I think when you love someone, there comes a time when you have to have honest conversations, right? So like you can't just go into any situation or setting and behave any kind of way that you want to. You're going to be hurt. You're going to be locked up in any number of ways, because that's just not what's normalized in our society. So I don't want to ever walk away from these conversations. And, because I see it a lot, that we have low expectations of kids who have challenging behaviors. And having a firm conversation or setting some real boundaries does not mean you're not honoring social emotional learning.
Wonderful. All right, well, we are down to the last 2 minutes. So just a quick reminder. Ebony, was there anything you wanted to just kind of wrap that up with? Sorry.
No, you're good, Dr. Reinhardt. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for leading us. So we have our next meeting on February 17th. So we hope you will all come back and join us. We're going to continue to go through these important competencies, and again, make sure we understand ourselves, what they are, and what does it mean in the MSD of Wayne Township. Like the definition of self-management, the very first definition, number 1, was the Castle competency definition from, what we say is kind of the hallmark. However, we always adapt in Wayne, and we think that's really important. And so the other definition, I think all of you thought was a much better definition, and we want to make sure we're doing that. And that's why these conversations are really important for us, and your participation and your voice and your feedback, because as we move forward, in our district, in our community, we want to make sure that it truly makes sense. And when we say self-management, we have that common definition of what that is. So we'll see you again on February 17th. This is recorded, so we'll have it out on our YouTube channel so that you can pass it on to staff. I know we have some administrators. You want to throw it in your staff newsletter. We would love that and appreciate that. But I know our SEL coaches will also be making sure that some other staff get access to it. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. We're here to support you, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a great Friday. And I have to say, go Iowa Hawkeyes, because they're playing Michigan on Saturday. So you know where I'll be. Thank you all.
Well,